put a lot of stuff out, but we are very important when it comes to boards and the execution of boards. So really my brief today is just going to kind of tell you a little bit about what we do in the DA Secretariat, and give you an overview of the new centralized NCO evaluation board process. Okay. So the mission of the DA Sec, I mean, really all we do is we conduct centralized boards for the Army. That is our main job here. We don't promote, we don't reduce people in rank. If you're not promoted on the first for whatever reason, that's not really us. We just execute the boards. So our main purpose is to execute the boards, create OMLs, and these OMLs are what is used to select individuals for promotion. And so we've always done the same thing, even in the past when we used to do the promotion selection boards before we moved to the evaluation board. Our process here has been almost exactly the same. We're just changing the way that the OML is utilized for all of you in the Army. And that's kind of what I'm going to cover in some more slides. So what is the NCO evaluation board? So first I'll start off with the promotion selection board. So I know many of you were probably promoted on a promotion selection board. If there's some staff sergeant promotables in the audience, you were promoted on a promotion selection board. You were selected for promotion. The goal of the old promotion board was to promote. That was what the Army wanted to do. The Army conducted a board to determine who the best qualified is to select for promotion. We've since moved away from that. So the new NCO evaluation board, yes, promotion is a part of it, but essentially we're doing a process that's going to evaluate all the eligible NCOs. It's going to establish an order of merit list. So it's going to rank all of you from 1 to whatever in your MOS, 1 through N. And this OML is going to be used in its entirety to inform multiple decisions that the Army and that HRC makes. Okay, it's not only going to be, okay, let me look at this list and see who we need to promote. It's going to be, hey, let me look at this list. Let me see who needs to go to training, who's going to training first, who's going to get priority, PME, who needs to be promoted based on Army requirements. There's going to be certain assignment considerations with EPMD based on where you fall on your OML. And of course, there's going to be retention decisions that are made by the Army. So in the past, you could get looked at by a promotion selection board 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row and not be selected for a promotion. And really that just means, hey, you just didn't get selected. You don't know where you fell on that OML. All you know is you didn't get promoted. Now it's a little bit different. So now if you fall too far down on the OML based on your score, if your score is low enough, the Army will give you a bar to continue service and separate you the first day of the 7th month after that second board. Okay, so we'll get a little bit more in depth with that. But the key thing to remember is there is no longer a promotion board. The board is now an evaluation board, and it's going to facilitate not only promotions, but training, assignments, and retention. So types of evaluation boards. These are the types of NCO evaluation boards that we conduct here in the DA Secretariat. The thing I want you to pay attention to is right there on the left, the names of the actual boards. So for all my staff sergeant promotables that are out there, you were selected by the Sergeant First Class Promotion Selection Board, right? So you were a staff sergeant competing for that next rank, and it matched the name. Now it's going to be different. So now the evaluation boards are based on the current rank that is being evaluated. So if it's the Master Sergeant Evaluation Board, we are evaluating Master Sergeants at that board, okay, to facilitate those 3 things that you see on the right. Okay, so no longer is it a Sergeant Major Training and Selection Board, it's a Master Sergeant Evaluation Board. Same thing, this board that we are conducting next week, the Sergeant First Class Evaluation Board, that's going to be all Sergeants First Class that meet that criteria that was put out in the MILPER. So I'll focus on that board since that's the board that's going to be conducted next week. So when that board, when we do the evaluation for that board and the OML is created, that OML is going to facilitate MLC attendance. It's going to facilitate assignment considerations, assignment decisions, And there will be some individuals who are also eligible for QMP for that board because they have bad DROG in their file. And also there will be individuals that score low enough on the OML where the votes put their continued service at risk. Okay. And then, of course, promotion is going to facilitate promotions on a month-to-month basis. And I'll get more in depth with how that's going to happen. But really, I just kind of wanted to show you this slide to kind of show you all of the things that this board is going to facilitate. It's not only promotions anymore. Here's the board schedule. Of course, we have the SARM First Class board starting next week. The staff SARM evaluation board is going to be in February. I know that MILPER message just came out, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday. Promotions released it. We have the Master SARM evaluation board in April, and then the SARM major evaluation board that evaluates all SARM majors next August. And we plan on conducting these boards at the same time frame every year. Okay, it may not be the exact same day or the exact same month. It may cross over into a month either before or after, but for the most part, we want to make sure there's one board in every quarter. So we'll hold the SARM First Class board one quarter, then the staff SARM, Mass SARM, and CSM SARM major. All right, so the board process. All right, so I know there's a lot of confusion about the board process, and some people think the board is done a certain way, or it's all about who you know and things of that nature. So I'll kind of cover, how we actually conduct the boards. And please, if at any time you have any questions or you want to stop me and ask me a question about what I'm going over, please feel free to just come online and stop me. Because a lot of this process can be a little complex. So I'd rather you stop me and we just kind of, address it right there. Then we wait all the way till the end and then we got to revisit it. So please feel free to jump in. So the board process. All right, so the board process, we conduct the boards based on a memorandum of instruction that we receive from DMPM Army G1. So when we conduct these boards, we cannot just kind of do it the way we want to do it. If the board members come and they ask me a question, or they're like, hey, Master Sergeant Grant, can we do it like this? Or should we do this? Should we do that? Everything that we do with that board, if it's not in the MOI or it's not clear in the MOI, we have to get with DMPM Army G1 and we have to verify, what the intent is. Or if we need something added to the MOI, then they need to add it. We are just the executors. We cannot do anything without it being in the MOI. Now, the thing I will tell you about the MOI is that the MOI does not specifically state how soldiers should be voted. Okay, so it doesn't say, hey, if soldiers are in SVAB, vote them higher. If soldiers are recruiters, vote the recruiters higher than you vote the drill sergeants, or vote the drill sergeants higher than you vote the recruiters. Okay, there's none of that. So it talks about special duties, it talks about SVABs, but it's very broad. So it just says, hey, SVAB, are a select few people that volunteer, they're selected, they go through a course. It speaks to the position itself and the units, but it does not tell the board members or sway the board members on how to vote. It's up to the board members to decide, okay, is that SVAB soldier, are they a high score? Are they a 6+, which is the highest score you can get? Because there may be someone in the SVAB that's not doing what they're supposed to do. So we leave it up to the board members. So board membership, very quickly. So the board membership that we have for these boards, we do not pick the board members. Sergeant Major Management Division sends down a tasker to get board members for us. But it's all based upon a matrix. So every panel, depending on what panel it is, it's going to require a certain MOS. It's going to require, a certain number of minorities. It's going to require an AGR soldier for some panels, depending on if they're looking at AGR records as well. It may say that they must be a battalion CSM or they must be a brigade CSM. And then there's certain special missions units requirements for like SF, infantry, MI. But the panel size is going to vary depending on the MOSs that are getting looked at, which you'll see in my future slide. And just for your situational awareness, so all the board members, they come TDY to Fort Knox, Kentucky. There's no voting. There's no voting by, hey, I'm going to get online and look at these files and let the DA-Sec know how I voted. No, they actually have to be here physically. So even during the COVID environment, we postponed boards for a month and a half, but ultimately we got an exception of policy to come back, and board members still do come here to vote files for the board. Do you have a question, CSM?
Yeah, question. What's the reasoning behind them kind of redacting or blacking out who's attending the boards even afterwards? You can't even see who was at the board. Can you tell us, can you speak to us about the reasoning behind that?
Yes. So in the past, because I know I remember before I got stationed here in the DA-Sec when I was just a, sergeant, staff sergeant, I remember when the board results came out, they would show who sat on the board. But now it is redacted on our end. So the reason that it's redacted and we do not tell the field who sat on the board is because it became an issue. So, if I sit on the board, if or let's say CSM sits on a board, right, and he votes files along with his other, panel members, and let's say you end up with a low OML number or an OML number that's not good, right? So now you're trying to figure out, okay, what's the issue? Why did I score lower than this guy? Why did this person score higher than me? This person I know had DROG. So you're looking at all these different things, but now you know who the board member is. So you're hitting up the board member saying, hey, I know you sat the board. What was wrong with my file? What was this? What was that? It just became cumbersome for the board members because it's a lot. If you're for this SARM first class evaluation board, we have about 29,000 soldiers that are being looked at. Okay. And one panel may have upwards of 6, 7, 8,000 people. So if we have a panel of 8,000, and all 8,000 of those soldiers know who the board members were that sat on their panel, now you have all of them, kind of asking all the board members, hey, what did you see? What did you see? What did you see? When in fact, the board membership is supposed to be close hold. No one is ever supposed to know who sat the board unless the board member themselves decide to share that, like to give an LPD. They can't talk about specific people, but they can share, that they did sit a board. Does that answer your question, Sergeant Major?
Yes, it did. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so very important. So this is the SARM First Class Evaluation Board. So this is how the panel breakdown looks. So all of these individuals will actually be here Monday. They will all check in, but this is kind of how it breaks down. So as you see at the top, we have a board president. So the board president is going to be a brigadier general. The board president is not voting on your file. Okay, the board president does not vote on your file. The only files that the board president sees are the QMP files. So if there are individuals that are eligible for QMP, the board president is a part of that process. For the panels, I'll show you the panel breakdown. So for instance, if you look at panel alpha is infantry. Because that panel is identified as infantry, that colonel, those 2 command sergeants major and that 1 sergeant major, they are all going to have an infantry background. And the only files that they will look at are infantry candidates. So if you're an infantry soldier and you're getting looked at by the SARM First Class Evaluation Board, your file will be seen in panel alpha and panel alpha only. You will not have a sergeant major from any other MOS or any other panel reviewing your file. Only the 4 individuals in that panel will look at your file. Okay. For some panels, it's a little bit different. So if you look at panel Charlie, that's aviation and armor. So because that panel is identified as aviation and armor, that means if you are an aviation or an armor MOS, you will be seen in panel Charlie. But that also means the membership breakdown is split. So that colonel is going to be either aviation and armor, and those 2 command sergeants major and that 1 sergeant major will be either aviation or armor. Now, if you look at the number of records, it does say 24,000. That was what we had originally planned for, was 24,000. But of course, it shot up to 29,000. So there's 29,000 records split between all of these panels by MOS. And we will release the board panels to go back as they finish. Okay, so if panel golf, all the MI panel, if they're done voting candidates first, we will let them close out with the board president. We'll create their OML, and they can go back to home station. They don't have to stay the entire 24 days. We do not make anyone stay the entire time if they've done voting. If the panel is done voting, they can go back home station. So do I have any questions about the panel breakdowns and how records are voted, or as far as who votes records? Okay. All right, so board file composition, what can the board members see? Okay, so the board members actually have access to the performance section of your Amherst. Okay, so they can see everything in there. So I know there's a rumor that, hey, you know, they can only see the last 5 evals, they can only see this, they can only see that. No, the board members can see anything that is in the performance section of your Amherst, okay, your OMPF. They can see all your NCOERs. If you got 30 NCOERs, they will see all 30 NCOERs. Now, do they have to look at all 30? No, but they do have the access to look at more than 5 if they choose to. Correspondence to the board president, so a letter to the board. I'm not sure if anyone on here has done a letter to the board, but I can tell you a letter to the board normally hurts soldiers, depending on why they wrote a letter. So for some reasons, there are legitimate reasons for writing a letter. You know, especially in this COVID environment, you know, if there's an issue, you know, with you updating your file, updating your record, there's an issue with, you know, something on your SRB that cannot be fixed. Not that you never got it fixed, but that cannot be fixed. Anything specific. So anything on a case by case basis, yes, it's good to do a letter, but you also have to remember the board members, they're going to take it for what it is. So if they see the letter and you say, hey, you know, the reason my SRB isn't updated is because of XYZ, it has to make sense. You know, if you say, you know, my SRB is not updated because of COVID and this board, you know, happened, you know, right when the COVID started, you know, that's one thing. But if COVID has only been in for like 3 days and then you're saying, oh, I couldn't update my SRB because of COVID, you know, the board file is open for 60 days. The board file is open that entire time frame. So it has to make sense because they know your board file is open for 60 days. They know you have ample time to update. So sometimes a letter may seem like an excuse. So you have to be very careful on why you are writing that letter. Do you have any questions about letters to the board? Okay. And then, of course, they'll look at the record brief. So first thing will be the letter if you wrote a letter to the board. Second thing will be the record brief, or it'll be the first thing if you didn't write a letter. And then the performance section of your Amherst. That is everything that they can see. And I will tell you, do not write a letter to the board about your GOMAR or your Article 15 or anything like that, saying that it's in your restricted file, because they cannot see your restricted file in an evaluation board. They can see it on a QMP, but if you're not QMP eligible and you're in the evaluation board, they will not see your restricted file. So if you write a letter saying, hey, at GOMAR, you know, 5 years ago, they can't see it, but now they know about it because you just told them. Okay. Myths versus facts, we covered this a little bit. So the board has access to your entire file. So people think they only get a certain amount of time to look at it, 3 to 4 minutes. That is just the average amount of time that it takes a board member to look at it. The board member actually has as much time as they need to look at your file. We just say an average of 3 to 4 minutes because by then the board members already know what their voting philosophy is. So if I'm a board member, I already know, okay, if I'm looking at the 42 alphas, I already know what a SAR first class should have done based on DA PAM 600-25. I already know what type of education I'm looking for. I already know what my philosophy is on, military education, NCO block checks, or, narratives. I know what I'm looking for. So based on that, I'm only going to look at the file based on what I'm looking for. If I'm only want to look at the last 4 evals, I'm not going to look at 15 unless I have to. So if I look at the last 4 evals and 2 are good and 2 are bad, I'm probably going to look at more evals to kind of give me a better understanding of the up and down kind of ratings. Okay. But if I look at 4 evals that are all outstanding, great comments, great narratives, most qualified or highly qualified, then I'm probably done looking at evals. I'm going to look at something else. So that's a key thing to remember. They can look at your entire file. And typically, the longer they spend on a file, it's probably not a good thing, because if they're spending a lot of time on your file, it probably means that they see some things or they need some questions answered. So they're digging a little bit deeper. Now, next we'll get into kind of how we create the OML. So I'm going to show you how they hard vote the files, like what they're actually scoring the files as. I'll show you how we create the OML and how we establish the lines for most qualified, fully qualified, and not fully qualified. Okay, because in the past we didn't have all these different identifications. You just kind of know, okay, I was selected, I was recommended for promotion, I'm on the selection list. But that has since changed. Okay, so now you fall into a specific category, and that category really depends on what your future is going to be. So here we have a word picture. So if you look at this word picture, we use this for the staff sergeant through master sergeant evaluation board. If you look at the top, the highest score that you can receive is a 6. Okay, so there's a plus or minus next to it because we give every score a plus or minus identifier, except for the 1. Because if you're scored a 1, it's not good. So whether you get a 1 plus, we can't say, hey, they're not good a little bit. If you get a 1 is just a 1. So there is no plus or minus. So if you look at 6 plus minus, right? So if you receive a 6 plus, that is going to be the highest score that a board member can give you. 6 plus is the highest. The next score down would be a 6. The next score underneath that would be a 6 minus. So overall, a 6 minus, 6 plus, and a 6 is a good score. But we do keep track of the pluses and minuses, and you'll see in the future slides of why we do that for the OML. So the key takeaway from this slide is, not everyone is going to be a 6. Some files will look like a 5, some will look like a 4, some will look like a 3. But I will tell you, if a board member is voting you a 3 or higher, they are basically saying this candidate should be fully qualified for promotion, fully qualified to stay in the Army. Okay. You had a question, CSM?
Ladies and gentlemen, y'all could jump in whenever you have to, but hey, I'll ask the questions for you if you need me to. But Sergeant Grant, for example, could you give us some examples of what a 6 plus or maybe a 5 plus would look like? Because right now, the way it's read on the screen, they're looking at like, maybe is it just evaluations, or is it like awards? Is it other things?
Gotcha. Okay. So what I just spoke about, right? If you score a 3 or higher, the board member is basically saying you're fully qualified to stay in the Army. Now, when you're talking about the split between a 3, 4, 5, and 6, that is strictly going to be based on the board member themselves. Okay, so if I'm a board member and I'm sitting on the board, I'm going to have my own individual voting philosophy. So we do not have the panels come up with a group philosophy anymore. They do not have panel standards. So every board member that comes, they use their senior leader experience and judgment and the DA PAM 600-25. They determine what a 6 plus means to them, or what a 6 means to them. Okay, so it's strictly, actually that's my next slide, and then I'll come back to this slide. So if you look at this individual voter philosophy, that is what we harp on for the board members. They use the MOI, which is the guidance from, the Army. They use their senior leader experience and judgment, that word picture, and DAPAM 600-25, and they develop, what that is going to mean to them when they assess your file or when they evaluate your file. So, for instance, a 6 plus. So a 6 plus for me, me as a 42 alpha, if I'm sitting on a board as a SAR major, and I'm a board member, there are certain things that I'm going to look for that a 42 alpha must have done at SAR first class, right? For me to score them as a top few superior performer, superior potential. There's going to be certain things that I look for. Now, what I look for is dependent upon me, so it may go back to my own personal experiences, right? So I was a recruiter. So I have a recruiting background. So if I see candidates who have been recruiters, maybe I take recruiter into account. Maybe I say, okay, let me see how they did on recruiting duty because I have experience with recruiting. I was on recruiting duty. I know how it was. So for that may be important for me. But SAR Major Duke may be in my panel as well. And maybe he was a drill sergeant. So maybe he's looking at drill sergeants. Okay, how did they do as drill sergeants? So really, it's going to vary by board member and depending on who sits on the board. It's not always going to be clear cut that, hey, this MSM is going to get me over the top, or hey, this NCOER is going to get me over the top, or if I was an instructor, it's going to get me over the top. Really, it's all about the total soldier concept, the whole soldier concept. You just need to make sure, that you're doing everything that you can do and that you're excelling in all of it. And really the board is going to determine, kind of where you stand. But I will tell you, just because I was a recruiter doesn't mean I'm going to score every person who was a recruiter high. I may see recruiters that didn't do well, and I may see drill sergeants and I may score drill sergeants higher than recruiters. But it's going to depend on what the actual board member is looking for, their own individual voting philosophy. Did that answer your question, SAR Major?
Roger.
Okay. So back to the word picture. So 3 or higher is good nowadays because that means you are fully qualified to be promoted if there's a requirement. It doesn't mean everyone who gets a 3 or higher gets promoted. It just means you're eligible to be promoted. But if you look under that, you see a 2. That line, that dotted line is separating the fully qualified from the not fully qualified. So if a board member is scoring you a 2, they are basically saying you are not fully qualified for promotion. So you will still be on an OML. You'll still get an OML number. But at the end of the day, if the Army needs to promote, 50 11 Bravos and you're number 50, but your average score comes out to under that fully qualified line, it's less than a 3, the Army will not promote you. The Army will just take the loss. Okay. And that's really nothing different from what we did for the promotion selection boards. If you fall under the fully qualified line, you will not be promoted no matter what, no matter how many people they need. Now we've also added a second line. So that second line is separating not fully qualified and fully qualified from not fully qualified for retention. So if the board members are scoring you a 1 and majority of the board members score you a 1, you will get a bar to continued service if you have at least 36 months time and grade as of the board convene date. So if you had 36 months time and grade, you got looked at and majority of the board members say deny continued service, you will get a bar to continued service after that board, after the board results are released. Okay, now the other part of that is that bar will stay on you until the next board. So that next evaluation board that you are looked at, if you get another average score of, less than a 1.49 or less, if your score is coming out below that again, you will be separated from the Army the first day of the 7th month. Okay. So it will result in involuntary separation. And that bar and that separation does not have to be consecutive. Okay. It's basically in the same rank. So if I get looked at for, if I'm looked at the Master Sergeant Evaluation Board and I get a denied continued service, not fully qualified for retention, I could be retained. I could, on the next board, I could be fully qualified. The board after that, I could be fully qualified. But 2 years later, now I'm not fully qualified for retention again. If it's in the same rank, the Army will separate me. I think I have a question.
Hey, my friend, it's my first class results. So I am in the group that picked up Sergeant First Class 1 May due to the COVID restriction for NCO or NCOES. So I'm a Sergeant First Class, but I have not attended SLC. Is the highest number I can get that 2?
Hey, so you're coming in a little choppy. I didn't get all of the question.
So I was promoted 1 May under the COVID restriction. NOPR message saying,
Yep.
there was no NCO ESs. Is the highest I can get a 2 on this evaluation board?
So you will actually not be eligible for this evaluation board. So the only individuals that are eligible for this evaluation board is anyone that has at least 18 months time and grade, and that meets the requirements in the MILPER. But there's also a paragraph in there that talks individuals that have already been selected for promotion. If you've already been selected for promotion by a previous board, like a previous promotion selection board, the legacy boards, you will not be seen at the evaluation board. So you actually will not be seen by an evaluation board until the next rank.
Thank you.
Because you're saying you were promoted to Sergeant First Class, or that you are pending promotion to go to school.
No, I was promoted to Sergeant First Class. I have not.
Oh, you were promoted. Oh, yeah. So you won't be eligible for this board anyway, because you have to have at least 18 months time and grade, and I'm pretty sure you don't have that, right?
Negative.
Right. Okay. So yeah, you won't be eligible. But in the future, it won't matter. So school is not a requirement for the board itself. School is only a requirement to pin. So if we have another issue with COVID where someone pins before they go to school, the board members will already understand that. So they're not going to vote you a 2 because there's an exception in there of why you were promoted and you don't have school, if that makes sense. I see, Sergeant Major, you have a question?
Yeah, we have a question in the field. It says, do the points that you're awarded, like the 6+, the 5+, does that have anything to do with where you're placed on the OML?
Yes, it does. So I'll move forward. So does anyone have any questions about this specific word picture? Because it's going to get into the OML, and I'll show you how that works.
Master Sergeant, I have one. I don't know if you can hear me okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm First Class Foster. So I think we all understand probably what a 1 consists of, like derogatory, probably most likely somewhere down the road. Is that a 2 as well, necessarily, or are we just talking like an average performer, or we, like I said, are we talking derogatory stuff as well for like a 2?
So really, like I said, it depends on the board member. So a board member may see, some board members are going to vote harder than others. So a board member may see someone with just, average block checks, average NCOERs, nothing negative in their record. Some board members may say, hey, they're a 3, they're fully qualified, promote if you must, if there's, a requirement, average performer, average potential. But there may be another board member that looks and says, hey, this individual's, they've been in this rank for 5, 6, 7 years. I don't see any progression. They may say, hey, absolutely do not promote, retain them, keep them in the Army, but, they're a weak performer, just do not promote. So really it's going to depend. And there may be some individuals with DROG, but that board member may look at that DROG and say, well, that DROG was 3 years ago. It kind of looks like they're on the right track. I don't think they should be promoted yet, but, I'll give them a 2. That way they can't be promoted, but they also will not be kicked out the Army. Because a 2 will not give you a bar to continue service or put your continued service at risk. So really it's on the board member and the soldier's file, of what they're really using that scoring for. If they see a little bit of potential, they may say a 2. If they see absolutely no potential and just DROG all the way up and down the file, of course, it's going to be a 1. So I hope that answers your question. There's no clear answer because it's up to the board members. But I hope that kind of gives you some insight on it.
Yep, appreciate it. That's all I was
Okay.
looking for.
No problem. Okay, so if there are no other questions, I'll go ahead and move on so we could talk about the OML.
Master, I got one question. This is Sergeant First Class Ahsoka.
Yes.
So the question I got is in reference to MLC. With COVID, MLC is now a distance learning course. Does that look favorable to the panel if the person that is being evaluated has MLC already?
So that depends. It really depends on how you perform at MLC, because the board members, they will see, your 1059. So if a board member, they see a Sergeant First Class that has MLC before they were even, supposed to go to MLC, of course, it probably looks good. It's like, oh, they're ahead of the curve. They went to MLC. But if that 1059 is not a good 1059, or it's a very average 1059, it may not benefit. But of course, if you go to MLC and you're, number one in the class, honor grad, and all that stuff, that's going to play a part in, their voting philosophy, because the board member is going to say, oh, wow, they're a young Sergeant First Class, not even eligible to go to MLC yet, but they went and they outperformed the individuals that were there. So really, it just kind of depends on how you perform at MLC.
Roger that. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we kind of covered individual voter philosophy. I won't beat that dead horse. So let's talk hard vote calculation. So how do we actually calculate these votes to create an OML? Okay, so I kind of put this slide together to kind of help you. This never used to be a part of the slide deck, but I remember when I was out in the field and, individuals would come from the DA Secretariat and HRC and come brief, I could never wrap my head around the scoring. And it's actually quite simple. Hopefully I break it down to where you understand it. So just let me know if you don't understand anything. So here, if you look at panel Bravo, right? So panel Bravo for this particular panel is going to be all 11 Charlies, all SF, Special Forces, all PSYOPs, all civil affairs. So all candidates belonging to those MOSs will be looked at in that panel, and all those board members belong to those same MOSs. So each board member within that panel is going to hard vote the candidate a score of 1 through 6 plus or minus, just like the word picture we looked at. So if you look at the top example, of course we have 5 board members. Each 5 of those board members gave a 6 plus to whatever candidate they looked at. So let's just imagine, that's Staff Sergeant Smith, right? So all those board members looked at Staff Sergeant Smith. They all scored Staff Sergeant Smith a 6 plus. So in turn, the way we add that up is we do the whole numbers and the pluses and minuses separate. Okay, so a plus or minus will never add to or take away from a whole number. So we add all the 6s together first, that gives us a 30. And then we add all the pluses together, that gives us a plus 5. Okay. Now the whole number will always take precedence over where someone falls on the OML. So a 30 plus 5 will always be higher than a 29 plus 5. Because it's 30, okay? But if you look down here in the second one, you have a 6 minus, a 4, a 5, a 5 plus, and a 5 plus. We just do the whole numbers first. So we add up the 6, 4, 5, 5, 5, we get 25. And now to get that plus 1, we got that from the 2 pluses and the minus. So you see we have 2 pluses. That minus is going to cancel one of those out. So that's going to give us 1 plus. So their score is going to be a 25 plus 1. And if you look above that 25 plus 1, whoever scored a 25 plus 3, they are higher on the OML because the board members gave them more pluses. Okay. And they would be lower on the OML if the board members gave them more minuses. They'd still be a 25, but within that 25 range, they would be higher or lower based on the pluses and minuses that they have. Okay. And then, of course, the last example at the bottom. You got 3 pluses and 1 minus. That's going to give you 2 pluses because the minus is going to cancel out one of those pluses. So do I have any questions about that? Did that make sense? Is everyone tracking kind of how we add up the scores to figure out what the total score is for the OML? Okay, nothing hurt. So I think I explained it good. So now this one's a little different. So there's a lot of math in this brief. All right, for these next few slides. So identifying our most qualified, fully qualified, not fully qualified, and not fully qualified for retention NCOs. Okay, so how do we do that? So as you see here, we already added up all the scores and created, our total score. So now we know who falls where on the OML. What we have now is we have an OML math solution that is going to help us convert our total scores into an average score, because our average score is what's going to drive who's most qualified, fully qualified, and not fully qualified. Okay, it's going to be driven by the average score. So some of you may have been seen by an evaluation board. I don't know if you were. So if there was anyone here that was seen by like the Master Sergeant evaluation board, I don't know if there's any Master Sergeants online. When the fully qualified list came out, the fully qualified list had individuals' names with MQ next to it. If there was an MQ next to an individual's name, that means they were found most qualified by the board. Now that most qualified is that first line you see right there. And what that means is, that means the average score from a board member was a 5.5 or higher. So that means majority of the board members scored that individual a 6. Whether it be a 6+ or 6-, we don't pay attention to the pluses or minuses when it comes to average score. So if we have the total score of 30 and we divide that by the number of board members and it gives us 6, that means the average score from the board member was a 6, and that's above the average 5.5. So that gives them a most qualified rating. Okay. Now that most qualified rating, just because you're most qualified, that doesn't mean you're going to be promoted. Okay. It's really just there to make you feel good. You know that, hey, I'm doing what I need to do. All the board members looked at my file. They all think I'm a 6. Hey, I'm good to go. Or they all think I'm at least average score of 5.5 or higher if you're most qualified. Now, majority of the list was fully qualified. That just means that their average score was anywhere from a 3 through a 5.49. Okay. And of course, we did have a few that were not fully qualified, and we had some that were not fully qualified for retention. Okay. And that's also based on the average score. Okay. So total score drives where you fall on the OML, who's number 1, who's number 2, who's number 3. Average score drives if you're most qualified, fully qualified, not fully qualified, or not fully qualified for retention. Any questions about that? Anything I need to explain better? Okay. So here's an example of an OML. So now we've already gotten the total score. We've calculated the average score. What we do now is we put everyone in OML order. So just pretend this is an OML. There were 15 people that got looked at by this board. Okay. We can't fit 29,000 on here, so we'll just put 15. There were 15 people in this particular MOS that got voted. Now, if you look at OML position number 4, you see 4 of them. You see 4 4s and you see 2 8s. That means those individuals are tied based on their total score. You see they all have a 25 minus 1. Now, in order to break those ties here in the DA Secretariat, what we do is we break those ties by seniority. Okay, but that seniority break is only going to break the person within the tie. It's only going to break the ties in the 4s. So it's broken by data rank, BASD, date of birth. So first we look at data rank. So whoever is most senior by data rank, they will be the ones to move all the way up within that tie. So if you look at Harrison, right? So let's say Sergeant Harrison is the most senior data rank out of these 4 individuals, or out of these 3 other individuals. Harrison will move all the way up to 4, and then Andrew will be 5, 6 will be Clark, 7 will be Harrison, depending, or 7 will be the other one, depending on where they fell. Okay. Any question about the ties? All right. I think someone's got a hot mic on too. I hear some static. So example OML, right? So here's our OML. After we break our ties, we have a 1 through 15 OML. Everyone's there. We drew the lines. We know who's most qualified. We know who's fully qualified, not fully qualified, and not fully qualified for retention. This is essentially what our OML looks like after the board has voted your file. Okay. Once this happens, we kind of know where you stand, and you're really just waiting for a release date. So if there's no other questions about the process itself, I'll kind of give you a little insight of kind of what happens next. Is there any questions about the process itself or anything I went over?
Negative.
All right. So let's talk schooling first, right? So one thing that we're going to do is we send this entire OML to schools branch. All right. So schools branch will have this OML. The only people that they will receive is the most qualified and fully qualified individuals. So schools branch will have the OMLA 1 through 10. If you look at that example, 1 through 12, they will have Joe through Harding. They will have those names. And what happens is they will schedule them for school, whether it be MLC, SLC, whatever's up next for promotion. They will schedule them for school based on where they fall on the OML, because the plan is to promote in OML order. So we need to make sure that they've gone to school and that they're school qualified so that we can promote them, or that the Army can promote them. So that's it for schools. Schools has the OML. They'll know, okay, we need to schedule them in this order. So next thing, assignments. So I won't really talk the assignments piece because I know they're still working on that with the enlisted marketplace. But I will tell you the OML itself, there is an algorithm that will get sent to EPMD. So your career managers and your professional development NCOs, they may not know what your OML is, but they do have a tool that they use within their toolkit. They have the MOP tool. They use that tool to fall into as far as how competitive you are with your peers. So the OML that we create in this is a part of that algorithm that filters you into specific buckets. So that's really all I'll cover on the assignment end. On the retention end, so we also send the OML to transitions branch. So we will send the not fully qualified for retention. So that one guy, Sergeant Barney, we will send that soldier's name from the OML. We will send that to transitions branch, and transitions branch, if that individual has 36 months time and grade, they will get a bar to continue service if this is their first time being seen and they are found not fully qualified for retention. Okay. If it's their second time that they're found not fully qualified for retention, they will also be notifying them that they will be separated from the Army the first day of the 7th month after the results are released. Okay. And then last but not least, which I'm sure everyone's waiting for, is how are we going to promote off of this? So as you know, there are no more promotions, okay, as far as a promotion selection list. Okay, we're going to promote, but you are not going to know if you're getting promoted based on the results. Okay, so in the past, it was like, hey, my sequence number is 350. Hey, at least I got a number, right? That is no longer. You will have a number, but that number will not guarantee you promotion. So if you look at OML position number 1, Sergeant Joe, right? So Staff Sergeant Joe, we can say he's OML position number 1. More than likely, Staff Sergeant Joe will get promoted because the requirements for promotion are going to be done on a month-to-month basis. So there will be a quarterly report that is put out that HRC will put out and say, hey, this is what we plan to promote for this quarter. But basically, it's going to be done on a month-to-month basis, the same as it was when we were specialists and sergeants. So when we were trying to get on that website, check the cutoff score, see if we made it, it's going to be the same thing. HRC will be posting the by name of who is getting selected for promotion the first of the next month on the 15th of the month prior. Okay, so you'll get about two to 3 weeks notice, probably 2 weeks notice. So more than likely, Joe will know. Joe, today's the 15th of October. So Joe will get notified. You know what, Joe? In your MOS for 11 Bravos, they need to promote 2 this month. So Joe will know because Joe will see the by name. Joe and Porter will both see their by name selection. They'll see the orders, and they will be promoted the 1st of November. Okay. Romero Adams, Andrew Clark, they're just going to have to wait month to month to see if a requirement comes down for their MOS. Now, I will tell you, let's say we go through the entire 11 months, right? We're on the last month. We've done 11 months. And let's say we've promoted all the way down to Hunter, which is OML position number 9. So in 11 months, we've promoted down to Hunter. And now this is the last month before the next evaluation board. The list comes out, and come to find out, they did not promote any other 11 Bravos or 42 Alphas, whatever MOS this is for you. They don't promote anymore. So because they don't promote anymore, that means Sutcliffe was the next one on the list, but he did not get selected for a requirement. Sutcliffe, Curtis, Harding, everyone underneath him will be put back into an evaluation board with the new eligibility. So whoever is now eligible for an evaluation board, they will all be put back into a board, and we'll do the process all over again. So Sutcliffe's number 10 OML position will not matter at all. It will have nothing to do with the next OML position that he receives. So if Sutcliffe was goofing off for 11, 12 months, didn't do anything, but his battle buddies were going to, NCO of the quarter, NCO of the year, and they were out there knocking out civilian education, now they have all just jumped Sutcliffe because Sutcliffe wasted a year of not doing anything while other individuals were trying to move up the OML. So it could become an issue. So you need to make sure that you stay competitive and you continue to, improve yourself and continue to do what you need to do. I see I have a question. Sarvon?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I heard you say basically after 12 months, the cycle just kind of starts all over again. So like in previous years, they had 24 months to go through the whole list for selection, correct?
Correct. Based on a promotion list, yes, they did. They had 24 months to exhaust that promotion list.
So now you're saying it's just down to just 12 months versus 24 months.
Well, the promotion list was different. So for a promotion list, everyone that's on that list was selected for promotion, and they are guaranteed to be promoted within 24 months of that list as long as they stay eligible. Don't get demoted, don't get flagged. What I'm saying here with the OML is there's no longer a promotion list. So now instead of those, 12 people that were on the promotion list, now we are going to open up the entire OML of everyone that was eligible. And now we have an OML of those 12 plus everyone that was eligible for the board. So they're not going to look in the future and say, hey, we're probably going to promote this many, so select this many of them. They are just leaving the OML in its entirety as is, and they're going to promote on a month-to-month basis depending on what the Army needs at that time.
Tracking. Thank you.
Yep. So it will only be good for about a year, till whenever the Army says, hey, this list is no longer good, whether it's exhausted or not, and then they conduct another evaluation board. Any other questions about that? Okay.
Hey, Masson, so is the only way to access the OMLs is through the ACT and only the soldier and the people that they grant? Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yep. You know exactly where I was headed with this, Sergeant Major. So Army Career Tracker is where you can check your OML numbers. So I know many of you who are promotable right now. If you're promotable because you are on a promotion list, you have an OML number. That was more of kind of a test run to make sure it worked, but also to kind of let you know where you stood among your peers that were selected for promotion. Okay, for the future, for our individuals getting looked at by the evaluation board, their OML number will reflect where they stand versus everybody that was on that board. Okay, so for the promotion selection list, we had to put, if there was only one person that got selected for promotion at MOS, we gave them their OML number of 1 of 1 because there was only one selected. For the future, it'll be based on everyone that was seen by that board. So when you log into Army Career Tracker, there will be a release date set in the MILPER that says, hey, log in this day to see what your OML is. This is exactly what you'll see. And your OML, so this case, Sergeant Cho's OML is 68 out of 419. That means that on that OML that I showed you, that means Sergeant Cho fell at number 68. And there were 419 Sergeant First Class 42 Alphas that were eligible. Okay, so it'll give you a good view of where you stand amongst your peers. But as Sergeant Major said, you can only share that with leaders and mentors that you choose to share it with. You don't have to share it. I mean, I can tell you when we first started the OML, I saw people posting it all over Facebook. It was out of control. But leaders, as a leader, you cannot force a soldier to show you their OML or to tell you what their OML is. So the OML is private between, the soldier and, the Army Career Tracker system. But most leaders will have that good rapport with their soldier, that the soldier will feel comfortable to share it and ask, hey, here's my OML. What can I do better? Or what do I need to do better? Or, here's my OML. I think doing my college education really worked. It's really just to give you a good view of where you stand. But that OML is going to drive those other 4 decisions as far as promotions and such. So any questions about the OML number in Army Career Tracker?
Master Sergeant, I got a question about that. So if I recall correctly on your earlier slide, all medical MOSs are considered by the same panel, correct?
For that particular board. So I think the one I showed you was for the Sergeant First Class Evaluation Board. So yes, for the Sergeant First Class Evaluation Board, there are only medical that get looked at in a specific panel. Yes,
so
it's different.
So there's when you see. So sorry to interrupt. So I guess what I'm getting to is, so when you see your OML number, you don't really know where you necessarily stand against like MOS. You just know where you stand against all medical personnel, correct?
Well, it depends. So the OML itself is based on career progression MOS. So if what's a good one to use? So for instance, at the staff sergeant level for 11 Charlie and 11 Bravos, when they get their OML numbers, it will be 11 Bravos and 11 Charlies mixed in, because when they make Sergeant First Class, they all become 11 Bravos. So it really depends on what your career progression MOS is. If you feed into a different MOS and your MOS is going to change and other people feed into that MOS as well, it's going to be based on all those different MOSs. But if you're 42 Alpha and you're just going to 42 Alpha at the next rank, that OML number will only reflect all 42 Alphas. Does that make sense?
I guess it does, but specifically speaking for medical MOSs, for instance, I'm a 68 Quebec. If I saw this list come up, am I looking at my OML number out of all 68 Quebecs or all 68 series?
So that depends. So if you get promoted to Master Sergeant, what does your MOS become?
It stays the same as a 68 Quebec.
It's still a 68 Quebec. Okay. Now, do any other MOSs switch to a 68 Quebec when they promote to Master Sergeant?
Negative.
Okay.
Negative.
So yes, your number will be strictly based on the 68 Quebecs.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it, Master Sergeant.
Hey, also, Sergeant Foster, you'll be able to tell by the number too as well. Like, for example, my number, I could put out what my number was, but I was competing against 50 other sergeants major. So I could be able to narrow that down and say, okay, I know who I'm actually going up against. So for example, for Quebecs, there's only maybe what, maybe 30 or 40 of them. So if your number says like 500, you know you're not just going up against the Quebecs. You're going up against other people too as well. So trust me, you'll be able to tell.
Yeah, Roger, that makes sense, Sergeant Major. Thanks. Yeah, there'll be 8 of them for Quebec, so it'll be pretty obvious.
Yeah, so definitely if it says anything more than 8, please reach out to me because that means that we need to fix something. Because it should only say just Quebecs. It shouldn't be any more than that.
Thank you both.
Okay. Any other questions about this? My next few slides are really short. It's just kind of reiterating things that you already know. All right. So preparing for your next board. This is really just kind of some tips for you as you're competing in these boards. Submitting your records, looking at my board file, things like that. So read the MILPER message. The MILPER messages are very important now. We are going through a lot of changes. We've transitioned from one SMA to another SMA in the middle of this transition to the evaluation boards. So everything is constantly changing. So the MILPER messages are very important to read. Like for instance, the Staff Sergeant evaluation board MILPER came out for that board in February. The date of rank for that to be eligible is 36 months for every MOS except 18s, 37s, 38s. They have to have at least 24 months time and grade, okay? Which is a change because for the Master Sergeant Evaluation Board and the Sergeant First Class Evaluation Board is 18 months time and grade, okay? But the Staff Sergeant Evaluation Board, Army G1, they put a different data rank on there for eligibility. So definitely pay attention to the MILPER messages. Cleaning up the record brief, I mean, that's the same thing. All the incoming personnels and, just not updating your records overall is just not a good look for the board members. So many of you have already been in my board file before. You may have had trouble getting into the website. My board file is there for you, for your purposes. You go into my board file so that it shows you everything all at one time. It shows you everything that's in your iPerms and it shows you what's on your ERB. Okay. Whether or not you certify does not have any bearing over how the board votes you. We do not tell the board members if you certified or not. We do not take you off the board if you didn't certify. We don't mess with it at all. It's more for statistical reasons. And for you, the soldier, kind of this forcing function for you to look at your file and make sure it's good to go. So don't be worried if you didn't certify, you were deployed or something happened, you couldn't certify. It would not affect the way, your board files looked at, but it's there as a forcing function to kind of get you to review your files and make sure it's good to go. You had a question, Sergeant Major?
Quick question. One of my first sergeants brought this to my attention. So now that the DA photos are taken off of the board files, however, the date is still annotated on your SRB. Is that something that's going to be X'd out too as well? Or will soldiers be penalized for not getting a DA photo within 5 years that they can't even look at?
No. So from what I'm tracking, the DA photo is still a Army requirement. I'm not going to say board requirement. The DA photo is still an Army requirement. The board file has changed. So the date of last photo will be X'd out. So when we originally opened the board files 60 days ago, that change had not been made in the IT systems yet. But it has since been made as of a couple weeks ago. So the board members will not see the date of last photo. They will not see a physical photo and they will not see the date of last photo. Any other questions? Okay. NCOER is very important. Raters and senior raters, please ensure that you are enumerating your NCOs. But I will tell you, you have to be creative with your enumerations if you only rate or senior rate 1 or 2 NCOs or 3, right? Because if you're saying this Sergeant First Class is the one of one that I currently senior rate, or they're 1 of 2 that I currently senior rate, or 3 of 3, you're really not doing any justice for that NCO, and you're not giving the board members a clear picture of where they stand. Okay, if you're quantifying and articulating, it does not have to be with what you currently rate or senior rate. So let's say you rate a staff sergeant, you rate 3 staff sergeants, right? Of course, you have your number one. The number one is always clear, and then maybe, your number 2 and your number 3 are close. I mean, they're all good. Your number one's your number one, but then you got 2 and 3. You don't want to put on their eval, this one's 2 of 3 and this one's 3 of 3. You can always use, words to explain it. They may be the number 2 of 3 that you're rating or senior rating, but you don't have to put it on an eval like that. You can put, their number 2 of 30 staff sergeants that I've rated in the last 18 years, right? Or they're the number, 2 of 25, 42 alphas that I've ever rated, right? So there's different ways to get across your point of kind of where someone stands. Don't limit it to just that current population, because if someone's not rating or senior rating more than 5 people, I mean, it's kind of hard you really don't want to say someone's 4 or 5 if they actually are a high performer. Okay. Avoid inconsistencies in block checks and bullet comments. If it's a most qualified eval, that's fine, but the board members constantly complain about the comments along with that. If it's a most qualified and the narrative just does not reflect that, they really don't pay attention to the block check. If it's a highly qualified and the narrative is a most qualified narrative, it's a good narrative, great narrative, that normally helps the soldier. So it's not really all about block checks. It's more about articulating and just kind of how the narratives and the bullets are written. Any questions about evals? Okay. Letters to the board, we covered that. If you're going to submit a letter to the board, please ensure that it makes sense. The letter to the board is not your time to sway the board members' vote. Right? If you have a GOMAR, Article 15, whatever the case may be, I mean, a letter to the board, you can't really explain that away. At the end of the day, you have it. There's an appeal process and there's a process to get it removed from your records if it's not right and it's not supposed to be in there. But if it's in there, it's in there. I mean, the board members are going to see it. If it's not in the restricted, you spending 4, 5, 6 pages, to write out a letter to the board to explain it, it's probably not going to go in your favor. These are just helpful links. I can tell you my board file official, our official Facebook page that we use. That's normally a good page. If there's any issues, that's kind of our pulse on the field. Like when the field was having issues getting into my board file a couple of days ago when it was closing at night, that's kind of how we found out the issue with, too much traffic going into the system. Let me tell you, if you are eligible for a board, don't wait till the last day or the last week to certify your file. Okay. If there's 29,000 soldiers on a board, it's hard for the system to take part of that all at once because everyone's going in there certifying. And like I said, the certification is not going to change the way they vote. You can rest assured, as long as you went into your file at some point and made sure it was good to go, you're good to go. A certification, clicking a button is not going to change that. So it's more for you. Please certify your records. If there's any 42s on the line, please ensure that you're screening your personnel of who's eligible for the board and that you're reminding them to certify your records. But with that being said, that's really all I have. Here's my point of contact information. Unfortunately, at this moment, I'm not going to be able to release the slides yet. It's still kind of a work in progress. We're still changing some things. There's still some policies changing. And we don't want to send out multiple slide decks and confuse the field on what is actually happening. So we're a lot closer to release now because we've kind of solidified a lot of things, but I'm kind of waiting until this SARM First Class Evaluation Board to finalize it and say, okay, let's push this to the field. So my contact information is here. If you need to contact me, the best way is email. If you're having any issues with your board file, any questions about, the new process, misconceptions, anything